Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. So, in this video, I thought I would do something a little bit different. This channel is predominantly about movies and about my love for movies, but I also love music, and I love music just as much as I love my movies. I'm a keen guitarist, vocalist, hence the name Cinema Axeman. And yeah, I thought I would just, in this video, show you 10 of my favorite albums and showcase them to you. This is not necessarily my top 10 favorite albums, it's just 10 of my favorites, and I've tried to go with a mix of albums that have sort of different genres. I am predominantly into my rock music, but I do like a lot of different styles, different genres of rock music. And yeah, I thought I would just show them off. So yeah, let's just get into it. So there isn't really any specific order here. I've kind of just gone with alphabetical by album title. And the first album we have here is an album by the fantastic Van Halen, and we have 5150. So yeah, this is an album that came out in 1986, and it was the first album with Sammy Hagar on vocals. Now, I think Van Halen fans tend to be quite mixed on who they prefer as the vocalist of Van Halen, either David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar. Now, I do tend to lean more towards the David Lee Roth era, the earlier stuff. However, with that being said, I still think this is their best album. I just think all of the tracks on it are fantastic. It's very consistent. It's a really fun album with a lot of catchy songs. The band are great on it. I mean, Sammy Hagar's vocals are just incredible. Eddie Van Halen on guitar, you know, he just always had a great sound. Some really bizarre techniques and styles, but fantastic nonetheless. And yeah, I just think it's a really fun, catchy album from start to finish. It's very of its time, very 80s. It's definitely got that 80s production. Probably one of the more commercial albums from the band, but I still love it nonetheless. And I find myself revisiting this album quite a lot when I want to listen to music. So yeah, that is 5150 from Van Halen. Next up, we have a Beatles album, and you have to have a Beatles album in the list. And I think Beatles fans around the world will all have their different opinions on what they think is the best album. But for me, hands down, it has to be Abbey Road. Yeah, this for me is just the Beatles' masterpiece. It's a near perfect album. Just got some fantastic songs on it. I mean, you've got Come Together, you've got Something from George Harrison. He was never the most prolific of songwriters when he was in the band, but whenever he wrote a song, 9 times out of 10, it was always a great song. And I think his sort of limited songs that he wrote in the band, most of them stand toe-to-toe with whatever John and Paul wrote. I think the only song on this album I don't like is Maxwell's Silver Hammer. But yeah, the rest of them are great. I mean, you've got Oh Darling, you've got Octopus's Garden, which is kind of a throwaway, fun, silly song from Ringo, but I still think it's a very fun, catchy song nonetheless. And then you've got Side 2, which has that Abbey Road medley on it, and that was when the Beatles kind of, were leaning more into the progressive side of their music, and I'm a huge fan of prog rock, progressive music, so whenever a band tries to do something like that, I'm always on board for it, and I just think the medley on Side 2 is just fantastic. Yeah, they've got so many great albums, but this one is definitely my favourite. So yeah, that is Abbey Road by the Beatles. Next up, we have an album from a band that are probably not as well known commercially, but they are still a very well-known band amongst the progressive rock, progressive metal circuit. And I had to include an album from this band because they are, hands down, my all-time favourite band. And here we have Awake by the band Dream Theater. Now, Dream Theater are a progressive metal band. They're very well known for being highly acclaimed musicians. Everyone in the band is just a master of their instruments. I mean, you've got John Petrucci on guitar. He is my guitarist idol. I just wish I could play as well as he does. John Mayung on bass, who is probably one of the world's best bass players. The keyboardist at the time, Kevin Moore, fantastic. And the drummer at the time, Mike Portnoy, again, one of the world's greatest drummers, if not the greatest drummer. And then you've got James LaBrie on vocals, and on this album in particular, his vocals are just out of this world, just unreal. He's got such a fantastic voice, but I don't think he's ever been better than what he did on this album. And I could have picked any album from this band because, like I said, they are my favorite band, but I had to go with this one because this is the album that really got me into the band, and I just love everything about it. It's heavy, melodic, the musicianship is just unbelievable. And yeah, it's a really epic album as well. But yeah, that is Awake by Dream Theater. Next up, we have an album from the amazing Pink Floyd. But Pink Floyd fans might be a bit surprised with the album I've chosen here, but I've gone with The Division Bell. So yeah, this was technically their last album that they made as a band. Roger Waters had long gone by the time they made this album, and it was pretty much just down to David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Rick Wright to carry on. And I think this era gets a lot of hate from Pink Floyd fans, but for me, I think this album in particular is so underrated. I just love the atmosphere of it. I love the sound. I think the songs are just incredible, really epic in places. David Gilmour, his guitar playing is just fantastic. He always had such a sweet touch on the guitar. His tone, his sound, his feeling, it just always shines whenever he's playing the guitar. And yeah, I just love this album. It's just got so many great moments, and yeah, very underrated. Maybe objectively, it doesn't stand toe to toe with, their classic albums like Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, Animals, but nonetheless, I still find myself revisiting this album a lot more than those albums, and yeah, I just love it. That is The Division Bell by Pink Floyd. Next up, we have another prog rock album from the classic prog rock era in the 70s, and we have Close to the Edge by Yes. Now, this is an interesting album because it's about 40 minutes long, this album, but there's only 3 tracks on it. I mean, the title track is 18 minutes alone, but that song is just an absolutely amazing piece of music from start to finish. It's melodic, majestic, epic, chaotic. It's just got so many great moments in it. The musicianship is unreal. John Anderson's vocals are just fantastic. And yeah, it's just an absolutely brilliant title track. And then you've got the other 2 tracks. You've got And You and I, which is my personal favorite Yes song. I love the acoustic playing from Steve Howe, the guitarist. And I love the lyrics in that song. I love, again, the vocals from John Anderson. I just think it's a fantastic song. And then you have the last track, Siberian Catru, which is just, again, fantastic piece of prog music. Again, I could have picked a lot of different Yes albums, but for me, this is hands down their best and one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, that is Close to the Edge by Yes. Next up, we have an album from an artist who, again, is probably not as well known commercially, but he is a guitarist who is very highly regarded in the guitarist world, and he's a very, very popular figure. But we have the album Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani. And yeah, Joe Satriani is probably hands down my all-time favorite guitarist. Forget Slash, forget Hendrix. This is where the real money's at, in my personal opinion. I actually wanted to go with a different album from Joe Satriani, but I couldn't find my physical copy of it. So I decided to just go with this one instead. This is probably my second favorite album from him. And yeah, it's still one of my all-time favorite albums. The guitar playing is just unreal. He even sings on this album. He is predominantly an instrumentalist, but he does sing on a few tracks on this album, and he's not the greatest of singers, but I still think the songs are very, very good. And yeah, I just think it's a fantastic album. And if you like your guitar playing and want to check out more guitarists, definitely check out Joe Satriani. But yeah, we have Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani. Next up, we have an album that I have no doubt is probably considered a favourite for a lot of people, but we have Graceland by Paul Simon. Excuse the condition of this record, by the way. But yeah, this is just a fantastic album. I love how this album mixes that sort of pop rock sound, but then it has all those African influences in it. It just gives the songs a really unique sound and a really unique feel that you just don't really hear on many other albums or songs. And the songs themselves on this album are just fantastic. I mean, obviously you've got the title track, but you've also got The Boy in the Bubble, Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes. You've got the hit You Can Call Me Al, Under African Skies. There are just so many great songs. I mean, in fact, I think all of the songs on this album are good songs, and yeah, it's just undoubtedly one of my favorites. And I know it's a very, very popular album for music lovers out there. But yeah, that is Graceland by Paul Simon. Next up, we have Hotel California by the Eagles. Now, I think I've been listening to the Eagles since before I was even old enough to be able to register music. My dad was a huge fan of this band, and I always remember listening to them when I grew up. But I have to go with this album as their best, and again, it's one of my all-time favorites. This album for me is the epitome of a perfect album. Every single song is great. There is not one filler track here. Obviously, we've got the title track, a very, very popular song for a lot of different reasons, but you've also got some other amazing songs on here, like New Kid in Town, Life in the Fast Lane, Victim of Love, Try and Love Again, and you've got the closing track, the Last Resort, probably Don Henley's masterpiece. And yeah, I really can't say much more than that. It's just a perfect album from start to finish, and one of my absolute favorites. But yeah, that is Hotel California by the Eagles. Next up, we've got an album that probably leans a little bit more into country music, I suppose, but we have Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. Now, I was never really into John Denver growing up. It's probably only been in the last 10 years that I've gotten into him. But since then, I've just never looked back, and I'm now a huge fan. And again, this is one of my all-time favorite albums, and for me, this is definitely his best album. He was just such a fantastic artist. I mean, he had a great voice, he was a competent guitarist, and he was just a fantastic songwriter as well. And this album in particular is chock full of amazing songs. I mean, you've got the epic title track, you've got Paradise, For Baby, Darcy Farrow, Prisoners. And then on the second side, you've got, again, similar to the Beatles, Abbey Road. He's got sort of like a medley. He calls it the Season Suite, where it's this long song with different sections, and each section is about each season of the year. And it's just a fantastic piece of music. And yeah, the album on a whole is just awesome. And yeah, I can't say much more than that. Just a great acoustic country album from the great John Denver, and that is Rocky Mountain High. And then lastly, we have an album from Tom Petty, and we have Wildflowers. Now, I'm a huge fan of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but I do feel Tom Petty's best albums were his solo ones. That being said, I do think most of the Heartbreakers do play on this album, so it is technically a Heartbreakers album, even though it's only billed as a Tom Petty album. But nevertheless, this is without a doubt my favourite from Tom Petty. It's just full of amazing songs. You've got 15 tracks on here, and they cover lots of different genres. You've got the title track, which is a very soft acoustic ballad, but then you've got some really dirty blues songs like Cabin Down Below and Honeybee. You've got that epic album closer, Wake Up Time. And I also think this is probably one of the best produced albums ever. It's just got an amazing sound, very live, acoustic sort of feel to it. You really get the sense when you listen to this album that the band just recorded it all together in like a rehearsal room, and they all just performed together with very little overdubs. And I just love the sound and the feel that this album has. Again, I could have picked a lot of other Tom Petty albums, but this one is without a doubt one of my all-time favorites, and that is Wildflowers by Tom Petty. So there you go, guys. Those are 10 of my favorite albums. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's been something a little bit different. If you've liked what you've seen and you'd like to know more of my favorite albums, or you'd like me to go a bit deeper into specific music genres, just let me know in the comments. But also let me know if you've heard any of these albums yourself, or let me know what some of your favorite albums are. I would love to hear your thoughts and have a great discussion about it. But until then, I will leave the video there. So thanks again, guys, and take care.